CEO steals his wife's breath with every kiss. She clings to him like he's her world. Hello, my dear viewers. A warm welcome to each and every one of you. I'm so grateful that you've joined me today. It truly means the world to me. Before we begin, I want to start with a heartfelt prayer for you all. I pray that happiness fills your hearts, that peace surrounds your lives, and that love follows you wherever you go. May you find strength in difficult times and joy in even the smallest moments. May all your dreams come true, and may your hearts always be filled with warmth and love. I want you to know how hard I've been working every single day to bring you stories that live up to your expectations. Honestly, I've poured my heart and soul into creating stories that I hope will touch you deeply. But I have to admit, I'm feeling a little nervous today. I keep wondering, will this story entertain you the way you deserve? Will I be able to justify my ability as a storyteller? Can my words truly touch your heart? Can they reach into your soul and make you feel something real and lasting? I guess that's why I need your support so much. Your presence, your love, and your encouragement mean everything to me. That's all I want, nothing more. I'm here for you, and I'm here because of you. My viewers and listeners are my everything, and I hope with all my heart that today's story will touch you in ways you'll never forget. Today I'm sharing a truly special story, a blockbuster love story of two beautiful souls. It's filled with passion, emotion, and heart, everything that makes a love story unforgettable. I truly wish you'll enjoy this one as much as I've enjoyed creating it for you. Please don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear from you. Your feedback keeps me going, and it helps me grow as a storyteller. So now, without any further delay, let's dive into the story. I hope it touches your soul. Let's begin. Mike had stepped into the coffee shop with no expectations, just a brief escape from the chaos of corporate life, a moment to breathe away from the suffocating walls of boardrooms and flashing screens of endless stock reports, his mind preoccupied with deadlines, deals, and the cold efficiency of the business world that demanded every ounce of his attention. But the second he entered, the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the faintest hint of vanilla and caramel washed over him, a rare comfort in his otherwise rigid existence. And just as he was about to move towards the counter to place his usual order, something happened. Something so unexpected, so powerful, that it knocked the breath right out of his lungs, freezing him in place as though time itself had slowed, his entire being narrowing to a single focus, to a singular vision that he hadn't even realized was missing from his life until now, and that vision was her. Lisa. She sat near the window, bathed in the soft golden glow of the afternoon sun, filtering through the glass, her long, silky hair cascading over her shoulders like waves of midnight, her delicate fingers wrapped around a coffee cup, lifting it to her lips with an effortless grace that made even the simplest action seem poetic. Her eyes, though cast downward as she read from the book in her hands, held an unspoken depth, a quiet allure that pulled at something deep within him, an invisible force that rendered him utterly helpless, and for the first time in years, Mike found himself at a complete loss, his meticulously controlled world slipping through his fingers as he stood there, rooted to the spot, watching her, captivated beyond reason, feeling something he couldn't yet name but knew was profound. A shift, a moment that would change everything, because in that instant nothing else mattered. The bustling noise of the cafe faded into a distant hum. The conversations, the clinking of cups, even the rhythmic tapping of his own fingers against his phone ceased to exist, and all that remained was her. This woman who had unknowingly walked into his life and stolen his heart without so much as a glance in his direction, and he couldn't look away, didn't want to because for the first time in years, possibly ever, he wasn't thinking about numbers or contracts or strategies. He wasn't calculating risks or measuring gains. He wasn't the CEO feared and respected in business circles, the man who had built his empire from the ground up with ruthless precision. No, in this moment, he was just a man utterly mesmerized by a woman whose name he didn't even know yet, but who already felt like she belonged in his world, like she had always been there, waiting for him to find her. And as he watched her, he felt his heart quicken, his pulse racing with an urgency that was entirely foreign to him. And it wasn't just her beauty, though she was breathtaking beyond words, with her soft, full lips that he suddenly longed to kiss, her delicate features that seemed almost ethereal in the sunlight, the gentle curve of her neck that made his fingers twitch with the need to trace it. But it was something deeper, something in the way she carried herself, the way she seemed completely content in her own company, absorbed in her book as though the world outside didn't exist. And it was in that self-assurance, that quiet confidence, that he saw something rare, something real, something he had spent his whole life searching for without even realizing it. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, Mike felt his carefully constructed walls crack, his defenses slipping against this pull, this force of nature that was Lisa, and he knew, with a certainty that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure, that he had to know her, had to speak to her, had to hear the sound of her voice, had to see if it was as soft and enchanting as he imagined, had to learn every little thing about her, from the way she took her coffee to the books she loved to the thoughts that danced in her mind when she was alone. And he had never felt this way before, never had his control shaken so effortlessly, never had his heart raced at the mere sight of someone. And yet here he was, a man who had faced the most ruthless business tycoons without flinching, standing frozen in the middle of a coffee shop, breathless, overwhelmed, completely at her mercy. And she hadn't even looked at him yet, hadn't even noticed him. And the thought sent a strange thrill through him, because if he felt this much from just seeing her, he couldn't begin to imagine what would happen once their worlds truly collided, once her eyes met his, once she smiled at him, once he heard her laugh. And the thought sent an almost desperate need surging through his veins, an urge unlike anything he had ever known, because he couldn't leave without speaking to her, couldn't walk away and let this moment slip through his fingers. Because what if she was the one? What if this was fate? What if every decision, every struggle, every success and failure had led him to this exact moment, to this coffee shop, to this woman? And what if he let her slip away? What if he allowed logic to dictate his actions as it always had? What if he ignored this feeling, this pull? What if he turned around and left? No, the thought was unbearable, inconceivable, because he knew, deep in his bones, that if he walked away now, he would regret it for the rest of his life. He would always wonder what could have been. And Mike had never been the kind of man to live with regrets. He had built his empire by taking risks, by trusting his instincts, by chasing what he wanted without hesitation. And right now, in this moment, the only thing he wanted, the only thing he could see, was her. So he took a deep breath, steeling himself against the intensity of his emotions, and forced his feet to move, one step, then another, his heart pounding harder with each one, until he was standing right in front of her table. And then, as if sensing his presence, Lisa finally looked up, her eyes meeting his for the first time, and in that instant, everything changed, because the moment her gaze locked onto his, the moment their souls collided, he knew. She felt it too. Mike had never known a moment of hesitation in his life, never second-guessed his instincts, never felt his pulse race with uncertainty. But as he stood before Lisa, watching her lift her gaze to meet his for the very first time, he felt his entire world shift, an unfamiliar sensation flooding through him, something deeper than attraction, something more powerful than desire, something he couldn't quite name but knew was real. And as their eyes locked, he felt an invisible thread pulling them together, an undeniable force that made it impossible to look away. And then she smiled, a soft, hesitant smile that sent a rush of warmth through his chest, making his breath hitch in a way it never had before, and in that moment, Mike knew with unwavering certainty that this was no ordinary encounter. This was something different, something rare, something that had the power to change everything. And as he stood there, mesmerized by the way the golden afternoon light played in her hair, by the way her lips curved ever so slightly, he knew he had to speak, had to say something, had to seize this moment before it slipped away. So he took a breath, steadying himself, and with a confidence that masked the uncharacteristic nervousness humming beneath his skin, he finally spoke, his voice low and smooth. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I couldn't help but notice you from across the room." And the words felt inadequate, too small for the gravity of what he was feeling, but it was all he had, and for a split second he feared she might dismiss him, might brush him off with polite indifference. But instead her lips parted slightly in surprise before she let out a soft laugh, the sound so melodic, so effortlessly beautiful, that it sent a shiver down his spine. And then she spoke, her voice like silk, warm and inviting. "Not at all. I suppose I should be flattered," she teased, her eyes dancing with amusement, and just like that, the tension shattered, replaced by something lighter, something electric, something intoxicatingly effortless, and Mike found himself grinning, a real, genuine grin that he hadn't worn in years, because this wasn't just small talk, wasn't just a fleeting moment of flirtation. This was something deeper, something unspoken passing between them, something undeniable. And as they continued to talk, words flowing between them as naturally as breathing, Mike felt an unfamiliar sensation creeping into his chest, something terrifying yet exhilarating, because with every word she spoke, with every smile she gave, with every spark that ignited between them, he felt himself falling, felt the iron walls he had built around his heart crumbling, felt the weight of his carefully controlled life shifting beneath him, and he didn't resist it, didn't fight it, because how could he? When every fiber of his being told him that this, right here, was meant to be, that this woman, this stranger who felt like anything but a stranger, was supposed to be in his life. And as they sat there, lost in conversation, lost in each other, he realized that he had never felt this way before, had never wanted to know someone the way he wanted to know her, had never craved the sound of a voice the way he craved hers, had never felt this magnetic pull, this undeniable connection, as though the universe itself had conspired to bring them together. And it wasn't just the way she looked. Though she was breathtaking beyond words, it was the way she spoke with such passion, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the things she loved, the way she listened with genuine curiosity, as though every word he said mattered. And Mike, the man who had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, who measured conversations in business deals and negotiations, who had mastered the art of reading hidden agendas, found himself caught completely off guard because Lisa wanted nothing from him. She didn't know who he was, didn't know about the wealth, the power, the empire he had built, and yet here she was, looking at him like he was just a man, just Mike, and for the first time in years he felt free, felt weightless, felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And as minutes turned to hours, as coffee turned cold and the sun dipped lower in the sky, neither of them moved, neither of them noticed the world around them, because they were lost in something so much bigger than themselves, lost in the way their souls seemed to recognize each other, lost in the unspoken promise that hung between them, the promise of something real, something rare, something neither of them had expected but both of them had been unknowingly searching for. And as the evening air turned crisp and the coffee shop began to empty, Mike knew that he couldn't let this end here, couldn't let her walk away and become just a memory. So, with a heartbeat that thundered in his chest, he leaned forward, his voice softer now, more intimate, more certain than ever. "Lisa, I don't know what this is, but I know I don't want it to end." And she looked at him then, really looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the same realization, the same fear, the same exhilaration. And then she smiled, a smile so full of warmth, so full of understanding, that it stole what little breath he had left. And in that moment, he knew, they both knew, that whatever this was, wherever this was going, it was only the beginning. Because this wasn't just a conversation, wasn't just a fleeting attraction. This was fate. This was the start of something extraordinary, something life-changing, something neither of them would ever be the same after. And as they rose from their seats, as they stepped out into the cool night air, side by side, their fingers brushing ever so slightly, sending another jolt of electricity through them both, Mike knew with unwavering certainty that he would never be the same again, that from this moment on, his life, his world, his very existence would be intertwined with hers. Because Lisa wasn't just a woman he had met in a coffee shop, wasn't just a beautiful stranger who had caught his eye. She was his future, his heart, his everything, and nothing in this world would ever change that. Mike and Lisa had stepped into a world where love wasn't just a fleeting emotion, but an all-consuming force, a gravitational pull that neither of them could resist, and from the very moment they exchanged numbers that fateful evening at the coffee shop, their souls had already started weaving an unbreakable bond, one that deepened with every passing second, with every message exchanged, with every glance stolen in the middle of a busy street. And though their lives had been separate until now, they merged effortlessly, as if they had been written into each other's destinies long before they ever met. And so began their journey of love, one that was passionate, intense, and filled with moments so breathtakingly beautiful that they felt surreal. And it started with a simple text from Mike that night, a message that held nothing grand, yet meant everything. "I can't stop thinking about you." And Lisa, lying in bed, her heart still racing from their encounter, smiled as she replied, "Me neither." And just like that, their love story began, an endless conversation that stretched into the early hours of the morning, a connection that refused to fade even when the sun rose. And the next evening, Mike couldn't resist the urge to see her again, so he picked up his phone, dialed her number, and the moment she answered, her voice soft yet filled with excitement, he asked, "Lisa, have dinner with me tonight." And there was no hesitation, no second guessing, just an eager yes. That sent a wave of warmth through his chest, and when he arrived at her doorstep, seeing her standing there in a simple yet elegant dress, her eyes sparkling under the city lights, he knew he had made the best decision of his life. And as they dined in the soft glow of candlelight, their fingers grazing unintentionally across the table, their laughter intertwining like a melody, it became clear that this was more than just a date, more than just two people getting to know each other. It was a meeting of souls, a moment that would be etched into their hearts forever. And when Mike reached across to hold her hand for the first time, a silent promise passed between them, one that words couldn't capture, one that spoke of a love that would never waver. And as the night deepened, they took a slow drive through the quiet streets, Lisa leaning her head against the window, Mike stealing glances at her whenever he could, his heart swelling with a feeling so unfamiliar yet so right. And with the wind brushing through her hair and the city lights flickering past them, she turned to him and said, "This feels like a dream." And he replied without missing a beat, "Then let's never wake up." And from that moment they became inseparable, their days filled with whispered conversations over coffee, stolen kisses under the moonlight, and long walks where time seemed to stand still. And every night, before closing his eyes, Mike would think of her, his mind filled with the sound of her laughter, the way she looked at him like he was the only man in the world, and Lisa, lying in bed, would do the same, her heart aching with how much she missed him, even though they had just parted, and as days turned into weeks, their love only grew stronger, more intense, more undeniable. And one evening, as they stood by the riverside, the city lights reflecting in the water, Mike took her hands in his voice filled with unwavering sincerity, as he whispered, "No betrayal, only love. I swear to you, Lisa, I will never hurt you, never let anything come between us." And her eyes filled with emotion as she replied, "And I vow to stand by you always, through everything." And with those words, they sealed a promise that neither of them would ever break, a promise that would define their love, a promise that would make them unshakable. And as he pulled her into his arms, pressing a lingering kiss to her forehead, Lisa knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that she had found the love of her life, the man who would cherish her, protect her, and hold her close through every storm. And Mike, holding her even tighter, knew the same. That Lisa wasn't just a woman he loved. She was the very air he breathed, the reason his heart beat, the one he could never, ever let go of. And so, with the stars shining above them, with their hearts beating in perfect sync, their love story continued, deeper, stronger, and more passionate than ever before. Mike had planned this moment for weeks, ensuring that everything was perfect. From the rooftop setting adorned with twinkling fairy lights to the soft melody of their favorite song playing in the background, his heart racing in anticipation as he stood there, watching Lisa take in the breathtaking view, unaware of the life-changing moment that was about to unfold, the city lights stretching endlessly before them, casting a golden glow over the night, while the air carried a hint of roses, their fragrance weaving into the magic of the evening. And as Lisa turned toward him, her eyes filled with love and curiosity, Mike felt his breath hitch, realizing yet again that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on, her presence alone making his world brighter, his heart pounding as he took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to do would change their lives forever. And as he reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the velvet box that held the symbol of his undying love, he felt a rush of emotions, excitement, nervousness, and an overwhelming need to make Lisa his forever, his gaze locking onto hers as he took a step closer, every heartbeat echoing the depth of his feelings. And in that moment, Lisa felt a shiver run down her spine, sensing the shift in the air, the intensity in Mike's eyes making her pulse quicken, a warmth spreading through her chest as she watched him, the way he looked at her making her feel like the most cherished woman in the universe. And before she could voice the emotions swirling inside her, Mike slowly sank down on one knee, the world around them dissolving into nothingness, leaving only the two of them in this moment of pure, unbreakable love. Lisa gasping softly as her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes widening with shock, her heart pounding as she processed what was happening, her breath catching when she saw the small velvet box in his hand, and as he opened it, revealing the most exquisite diamond ring she had ever seen. Tears instantly welled in her eyes, overwhelmed by the depth of love shining in Mike's gaze, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, "Lisa, from the moment I saw you, my heart was no longer mine. You became my world, my everything, the reason my days are brighter and my nights are filled with dreams of you, and I can't imagine a life without you by my side. You are the love of my life, my heart, my soul, and I never want to spend a day without you. So, Lisa, my love, my angel, will you be mine forever? Will you marry me and make me the happiest man alive?" His words washing over her like a warm embrace, each syllable carrying the weight of his devotion. And in that instant, Lisa felt her entire being consumed by an indescribable love, her body trembling with emotion, tears slipping down her cheeks as she dropped to her knees in front of him, not caring about anything except the overwhelming need to be closer to the man who had captured her heart so completely. her hands reaching for his face, fingers tracing the strong lines of his jaw, her touch filled with all the love she held for him, and as she looked into his eyes, she saw everything she had ever dreamed of. Her past, her present, her future, all wrapped in the gaze of the man who loved her more than anything in this world, and with a soft sob escaping her lips, she whispered, "Mike, you are my world, my happiness, my forever, and yes, 1,000 times yes, I will marry you," her voice shaking with the intensity of her emotions, and before another second could pass, Mike cupped her face, pulling her into a kiss so deep, so passionate, that it felt like the entire universe had aligned for this very moment, his lips moving over hers with a desperate need to convey just how much she meant to him. Lisa clinging to him like he was her lifeline, her arms winding around his neck, pressing herself against him as if she never wanted to let go, and Mike held her just as tightly, his fingers tangling in her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, pouring every ounce of his soul into her, needing her to feel just how much he adored her, just how much he was hers. And as they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads resting against each other, he gently slipped the ring onto her trembling finger, his own hands shaking as he did, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her, just as he had been made for her. And Lisa stared at it, the undeniable proof of the promise he had made to her heart swelling with a love so profound it felt as if it would consume her. And as she looked back into his eyes, she saw their future, a future filled with endless love, laughter, and the kind of happiness that most people could only dream of. And in that moment, under the vast sky, wrapped in each other's arms, they knew that this was just the beginning, the start of a love story that would never fade, never waver, and never, ever be broken. Mike and Lisa's wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale, a moment in time where two souls became one, where love reigned supreme, and where the entire universe seemed to pause just to witness the unbreakable bond between them. The grand venue adorned with thousands of white roses, their delicate petals filling the air with a fragrance so intoxicating that it felt as if love itself was dancing in the atmosphere, the golden chandeliers casting a soft glow over the entire place, illuminating the shimmering aisle lined with candles, each flickering flame symbolizing the eternal love that would soon be sealed with a promise. And as the soft melody of violins played in the background, creating a magical harmony that resonated in every heart present, all eyes turned towards the entrance, where Lisa stood, breathtakingly beautiful in a gown that seemed crafted by the heavens themselves, the delicate lace hugging her figure perfectly, the soft layers of silk cascading around her like a waterfall of moonlight, her veil shimmering like stardust as it flowed behind her. And in that moment she was not just a bride, she was a vision, an angel stepping into the arms of the man who would cherish her for eternity. Her heart pounding wildly as her father held her hand, his eyes brimming with pride and emotion, whispering, "You are the most beautiful bride I have ever seen, and I know he will love you beyond anything." His words making her eyes glisten with unshed tears as she took her first step down the aisle, her gaze locking onto Mike's, and the moment their eyes met, the world around them disappeared. The guests, the music, the grandeur, all fading into a blur, leaving only the two of them in this sacred moment. Mike standing at the altar, his breath stolen by the sheer beauty of the woman walking toward him, his heart thundering in his chest, his hands clenching at his sides as he fought the overwhelming urge to run to her, to take her in his arms and never let go, the emotions in his eyes speaking volumes, a silent promise that he would spend every waking moment of his life making her the happiest woman on earth. And as she finally reached him, placing her hand in his, a shiver ran through both of them, the warmth of their touch igniting a fire that would burn for a lifetime, his thumb gently caressing the back of her hand as he whispered, "You are my dream come true," his voice thick with love and reverence, Lisa's breath hitching at the intensity of his words, her fingers curling around his as if anchoring herself to the only man who had ever made her feel this way. And as the officiant began speaking, their eyes never wavered from each other, their hands never letting go, the vows they had written from the depths of their souls now waiting to be spoken. And when it was finally time, Mike took a deep breath, his voice steady yet laced with raw emotion as he gazed into Lisa's soul, his heart laid bare for the world to witness. Lisa, from the moment I saw you, my heart recognized you as mine. You are the love I never knew I was searching for, the light that brightens my darkest days, the breath in my lungs, the beat in my heart. And today I vow to love you beyond forever, to stand beside you through every storm, to cherish you, protect you, and remind you every single day just how deeply you are loved. I vow to steal your breath with every kiss, to hold you so close that you will never doubt my love, and to spend the rest of my life proving that you are my greatest treasure. His words sending a wave of emotions crashing over Lisa, tears slipping down her cheeks, her hands trembling in his as she tried to steady herself, her heart bursting with love. And when she finally found her voice, it came out in a whisper, yet carried the weight of 1,000 promises. Mike, you are my heart, my soul, my home. You have shown me a love so deep, so pure, that I never want to spend a moment of my life without you. I vow to love you unconditionally, to be your peace, your strength, your safe haven. I vow to stand by you, to support your dreams as if they were my own, to fill your days with laughter and your nights with warmth. And I vow to hold on to you as if you are my world. Because, Mike, you are, her voice breaking with the sheer depth of her emotions. And in that moment, there was not a single dry eye in the entire venue, the love between them so palpable that it wrapped around every heart present, the officiant's voice barely registering in their ears as he finally said, "You may now kiss the bride." And before another second could pass, Mike was pulling Lisa into his arms, his hands cradling her face with the gentleness of a man who had found his most precious treasure, his lips descending upon hers in a kiss so passionate, so soul-stirring, that it left her breathless, her arms winding around his neck, clinging to him as if she never wanted to let go. And he kissed her deeper, claiming her in front of the world, sealing his vow with the fire of a love that would never fade, his lips moving over hers with a desperate need to show her just how much she meant to him, just how irrevocably she was his. And when they finally broke apart, breathless, foreheads resting against each other, the cheers and applause from the guests filling the air, Lisa smiled through her tears, whispering, "I love you." And Mike, his voice filled with unshakable devotion, whispered back, "You are my everything," before sweeping her into his arms, carrying her down the aisle as his wife, the woman who would forever own his heart. And as they stepped into the beginning of their forever, hand in hand, soul in soul, they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that their love story was the kind that legends were made of, a love so pure, so consuming, that it would stand the test of time, a love where every kiss would steal her breath, and where she would cling to him, not just for this lifetime, but for eternity. Mike carried Lisa in his arms, stepping into their honeymoon suite, the door clicking shut behind them, sealing them away from the world, leaving only the two of them wrapped in the intoxicating heat of love, the dim glow of candlelight flickering against the walls, casting golden hues upon Lisa's flushed cheeks, as her heart pounded wildly, her arms wrapped tightly around Mike's neck, her body melting against his as he held her close, his breath warm against her temple, his scent a mixture of expensive cologne and something purely him, something that made her weak with longing, her fingers tangling into his hair as she tilted her head, gazing up at him with eyes shimmering with anticipation, and the way he looked at her with raw hunger and unshakable devotion sent shivers down her spine, his dark eyes filled with an intensity so overwhelming that she could hardly breathe, his lips parting slightly as he whispered, You are mine, Lisa, only mine. His voice husky with desire, and before she could respond, before she could even gather a single thought, his lips descended upon hers, claiming her in a kiss so deep, so consuming, that it stole every ounce of air from her lungs, her body pressing tighter against his as he deepened the kiss, his arms tightening around her, as if he could never hold her close enough, her fingers gripping his shoulders, her heart racing as his tongue explored the sweet warmth of her mouth, tasting her, possessing her, making her his in a way that left her trembling. A soft moan escaping her lips as he walked further into the room, never breaking the kiss, never letting her go. His footsteps slow and deliberate, as if savoring the feel of her in his arms, the sheer rightness of having her so close. And when he finally reached the massive bed, covered in the softest silk, he lowered her onto it with infinite tenderness, his body hovering over hers as his lips trailed from her mouth to her jaw, down to the sensitive curve of her neck, his kisses igniting a fire that spread through every inch of her, her hands clutching at his shirt, desperate to feel more of him, her body arching beneath him as his lips found the delicate skin of her collarbone, his teeth grazing ever so slightly, sending waves of pleasure through her. And when she whispered his name, breathless and needy, it unraveled something deep inside him, his control slipping as he captured her lips once more, his hands sliding down her sides, memorizing every dip, every curve, his fingers tracing the outline of her body as if committing her to memory, his heart pounding wildly as he worshipped her with every touch, every kiss, every whispered promise of love, his body pressing against hers as he murmured against her lips, "I need you, Lisa. I need you like I need air to breathe." His words sending a shiver through her, her hands tangling into his hair, pulling him closer, needing him just as desperately, her breath hitching as his lips moved lower, exploring her with a reverence that made her heart swell, her fingers digging into his back as pleasure consumed her, their bodies moving in perfect harmony, lost in the rhythm of love, every kiss, every touch stealing her breath, making her cling to him like he was the only thing that mattered. And in that moment, he was. He was her world, her everything. And as the night stretched on, as passion and love intertwined, they lost themselves completely in each other, their souls entwining in a way that transcended time, their bodies pressed so close that not even air could come between them. And when dawn finally arrived, casting a golden glow over their entwined forms, Lisa lay in Mike's arms, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, her fingers tracing lazy circles against his skin, a soft smile playing on her lips as she whispered, "I never want to be apart from you." And Mike, his arms tightening around her, his lips pressing a lingering kiss to her forehead, whispered back, "You never will be, Lisa, I promise," sealing his vow with another deep, lingering kiss, a promise of forever, a promise that their love, their passion would never fade, but only grow stronger with every passing moment, with every breath stolen, with every kiss that left them yearning for more, because in each other's arms they had found everything they had ever needed. And as the world outside continued on, oblivious to the love that had bloomed between them, Mike and Lisa remained wrapped in the warmth of their first night together, a night that had forever changed them, a night that had bound their souls together for eternity. Mike had always been a man in control, a man who dictated the world around him with precision, never allowing emotions to rule him, never needing anyone beyond what logic dictated. But everything changed the moment Lisa became his, the moment she whispered her vows, the moment she looked into his eyes with love so pure it burned into his soul. And now he couldn't imagine a second without her, couldn't breathe properly when she wasn't near, his entire existence now revolving around the woman who had taken over his heart, his mind, his body, his very being. And as days turned into nights, as their love deepened into something unshakable, something more powerful than he had ever thought possible, he found himself unable to function without her, needing to hear her voice the moment he woke up, needing to feel her warmth the second he opened his eyes, needing to touch her, hold her, kiss her, to reassure himself that she was real, that she was his, and Lisa, sweet, beautiful, intoxicating Lisa, felt the same, clinging to him like he was the air she breathed, her arms always wrapping around him, her body pressing into his as if she feared he would disappear if she let go, her lips seeking his with desperate need, her voice a melody that soothed every wound he had never realized existed within him. And when he had to leave for work, even for the shortest time, he felt a gnawing ache in his chest, his hands itching to grab his phone just to hear her voice, to demand she send him a picture, to remind himself that she was still there, waiting for him, loving him, needing him just as much as he needed her, and every second apart was torture, a relentless craving that only her presence could satisfy. And when he finally returned home, the moment their eyes met, everything else faded. Nothing else mattered. His arms reaching for her, pulling her against him in a crushing embrace. His lips finding hers with a hunger that never faded, a desperation that only she could ease, his fingers tangling in her hair as he whispered against her lips. "I missed you," his voice raw, filled with the weight of his emotions, and Lisa would smile, that breathtaking smile that made his heart stutter, her hands cupping his face as she whispered back, "I missed you more." And it was in these moments, in the way she looked at him as if he was her entire world, that he realized there was no escape from this love, no way to lessen its intensity, no way to temper the possessive need that consumed him. Nor did he want to, because Lisa belonged to him just as much as he belonged to her, their souls entwined in a way that nothing and no one could ever sever. And the nights, oh, the nights were even worse, because sleep became impossible unless he had her wrapped in his arms, unless he could hear her soft breaths, feel the steady rise and fall of her chest, his hand resting protectively over her heart, as if anchoring himself to her. And whenever she shifted in her sleep, seeking his warmth, burrowing closer as if her body instinctively knew that distance, even in slumber, was unacceptable, he would tighten his hold, pressing a kiss to her temple, inhaling her scent, allowing himself to drown in the comfort of her presence, because there was no peace, no rest, without Lisa beside him. And when morning came, when sunlight spilled through their windows, painting her skin in golden hues, he would wake to the sight of her curled against him, her fingers clutching his shirt as if even in sleep she feared letting go. And his heart would swell, an overwhelming surge of love and possessiveness crashing through him as he traced his fingers down her cheek, whispering her name just to watch her stir, just to see her lashes flutter open, her drowsy gaze meeting his with a softness that unraveled him. And before she could fully wake, before reality could steal the perfection of this moment, he would claim her lips in a slow, deep kiss, pouring every ounce of his devotion into it, letting her know, without words, that she was his, that she would always be his, that nothing in this world mattered more than the love they shared. And as her arms wrapped around his neck, as she pulled him closer, as her breath mingled with his in a whispered plea for more, he would lose himself in her all over again, over and over, every single day, because no matter how much time passed, no matter how many kisses were stolen, no matter how many nights were spent tangled in sheets, wrapped in each other, it would never be enough, could never be enough, because their love was an addiction, an obsession, an unbreakable bond that consumed them entirely, making them prisoners of each other in the most beautiful, most passionate way. And as the days stretched into forever, as they continued to exist in this world where only they mattered, Mike knew, without a shred of doubt, that he would never let her go, would never allow anything or anyone to come between them, because Lisa was his, heart, body, and soul, and he was hers, completely, irrevocably, and nothing, not even time itself, could ever change that. Mike had always been a man of power, a man whose presence alone commanded respect, a man whose empire flourished under his sharp mind and ruthless decisions. But when it came to Lisa, his beloved wife, he was a different man entirely, a man who worshipped the ground she walked on, a man who found no greater joy than seeing her smile, hearing her laughter, watching her eyes light up with love every time she looked at him, and from the moment they became husband and wife, he had vowed to make her feel like a queen, to ensure that every single day of her life was filled with happiness, comfort, and the undeniable truth that she was the most cherished woman in his world. And so he did, in ways that made her heart race, in ways that made her fall in love with him more deeply than she ever thought possible, waking up to his tender kisses as he whispered a soft, "Good morning, my love," before pressing his lips to her forehead, his warmth surrounding her like the safest cocoon, his hands gently tucking her hair behind her ear, before lifting her into his arms and carrying her to the breakfast table, where a beautiful meal awaited, one that he had personally instructed the chef to prepare with all her favorite dishes. But on days when he wanted her all to himself, he would prepare breakfast for her, his powerful hands moving with surprising gentleness as he made fluffy pancakes, freshly squeezed orange juice, and a cup of coffee just the way she liked it, before bringing the tray to bed and watching with absolute adoration as she smiled up at him, her eyes filled with love as she took the first bite, savoring every moment, because more than the food, it was the gesture, the way he made her feel like the most important person in his world, the way he gazed at her as if she was the air he breathed, the way his fingers would gently wipe a crumb from her lips before he leaned in to steal a soft kiss, a kiss that always turned deeper, more passionate, leaving her breathless, leaving her clinging to him as he whispered against her lips, "You are my everything, Lisa." And throughout the day he never let her forget it. Whether it was sending her beautiful bouquets of roses with heartfelt notes, surprising her with elegant dresses that he wanted to see her wear, taking her on spontaneous dates to the most breathtaking places, or simply holding her hand and pulling her onto his lap as they sat by the fireplace, where he would press her close and whisper sweet words of love into her ear, reminding her just how much she meant to him. And Lisa, oh, Lisa, she adored every moment, not because of the luxury, not because of the grand gestures, but because of the love behind them, the way Mike made her feel so deeply, so completely cherished, and she, in return, did everything in her power to love him just as fiercely, just as passionately, ensuring that no matter how demanding his day was, no matter how many board meetings or business deals drained his energy, he would always return home to her, to the warmth of her arms, to the softness of her touch, and every night, without fail, she would make sure that his stress melted away the moment he stepped through the door, greeting him with a loving embrace, pressing soft kisses against his jaw as she led him inside, helping him remove his tie with delicate fingers, her touch feather-light as she whispered, "You work too hard, my love," before guiding him to the couch where she would sit beside him, gently massaging his temples, tracing slow circles along his shoulders, feeling the tension gradually leave his body as he relaxed under her touch, his eyes closing in sheer contentment. And when he opened them again, it was always with that same look, that look of pure, undying love, that look that made her heart race as he reached for her, pulling her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her as if she was the only thing that mattered in the world. And in those moments, nothing else existed. Only them, only their love, only the way he held her so protectively, as if afraid she might slip away, only the way their lips met in slow, lingering kisses, only the way their bodies melted into each other, their breaths mingling, their heartbeats sinking into a rhythm that belonged solely to them. And as the night deepened, as the world outside faded into the background, Lisa made sure that Mike knew, truly knew, just how much he meant to her, pressing soft kisses down his neck, whispering sweet words that made his heart pound, running her fingers through his hair as she reminded him that he was her everything, her king, her protector, her love. And as their passion ignited, as they became lost in each other, tangled in sheets, lost in a love so consuming, it left them breathless, left them clinging to one another, as if even the slightest distance was unbearable. Mike knew, without a doubt, that he could never love another the way he loved Lisa, that he could never live a day without her, that she was, and always would be, the queen of his heart, the love of his life. And as they lay entwined in the aftermath of their love, her head resting against his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns along her back, he pressed a final, lingering kiss to her forehead, whispering, "You make my world perfect, Lisa." And as she smiled against his skin, whispering back, "And you are my entire universe, Mike." He held her closer, vowing to love her like this, deeply, endlessly, forever. From the moment Mike and Lisa became husband and wife, their love story transformed into something extraordinary, something people could only dream of. A love so pure, so intense, so deeply unbreakable that it became legendary, admired by everyone who saw them together, whispered about in awe by those who longed for a love even half as strong, and as time passed, as their passion only grew deeper, it became impossible for anyone to deny that what they shared was more than just romance. It was devotion, it was obsession, it was a bond so fierce that even the mere thought of separation felt unbearable. And everywhere they went, their presence alone spoke volumes about the kind of love they had, the kind of love that was written in their eyes, in the way Mike held Lisa close, as if she was the most precious thing in his life, in the way Lisa clung to his arm as if he was her entire world, in the way he kissed her forehead with such tenderness that it left people breathless, in the way she looked up at him with stars in her eyes, as if he was the very air she breathed. And it wasn't just about the grand gestures, not just about the luxurious gifts, the candlelit dinners, the exotic vacations where Mike ensured she experienced the best of everything. No, it was the little things, the way he always reached for her hand no matter where they were, the way he instinctively wrapped an arm around her waist in a protective yet possessive embrace, the way his gaze darkened with desire whenever she so much as smiled at him, as if he was constantly battling the urge to kiss her senseless, right there in front of everyone. And Lisa, oh Lisa, she adored every moment, every second of being his, never once hesitating to show the world that she belonged to him and only him, always curling into his side, always pressing herself closer to him, always tracing soft patterns on his chest when they stood together, whispering sweet words that only he could hear, making his heartbeat quicken, making him grip her waist just a little tighter, making him lean down to steal a slow, lingering kiss that left onlookers breathless, because the love they shared wasn't just seen, it was felt. It was something that radiated from them, something that made people believe in soulmates, something that proved true love wasn't just a fantasy but a reality. And soon their love story became something of a phenomenon, admired by couples who longed to have what they had, whispered about by those who envied their passion, respected by those who saw how fiercely they loved each other. Because Mike and Lisa weren't just in love, they were inseparable. Their connection so strong that it felt like they were two halves of the same soul, and no matter where they went, no matter the occasion, they were always together, always lost in each other, always so deeply in tune with one another that it was as if the rest of the world ceased to exist. And it was in the way Mike always pulled out Lisa's chair for her before she sat down, the way he instinctively placed his hand on the small of her back whenever they walked, the way he ordered her favorite dessert without her even having to ask, the way he adjusted her scarf when it got chilly, the way he stole secret kisses even in the most formal gatherings, unable to resist the temptation of her lips, and Lisa, in return, made sure that Mike never felt anything less than adored, always fixing his tie before a big meeting, always running her fingers through his hair to ease his stress, always wrapping her arms around his neck and pressing soft kisses to his jaw when he needed comfort, always whispering, "I love you," in moments when he least expected it, making his heart clench with overwhelming emotion, making him grip her waist and pull her close, murmuring back, "You are my everything," before pressing his lips to hers in a way that made time stand still. And even in public, even in front of hundreds of people, they never hid their love, never held back from showing the world just how much they belonged to each other, because for them, every second spent together was precious. Every touch, every glance, every smile was a reminder of the deep, consuming love that burned between them. And as they walked through life hand in hand, as they continued to love each other with a passion that only grew stronger with time, their love became the ultimate example of what it meant to be truly, irrevocably, breathtakingly in love. A love so legendary that even years from now, people would still speak of Mike and Lisa, of the way they adored each other, of the way they never let a single day pass without expressing their love, of the way they proved that soulmates were real, that love, when true and pure, could last forever. And as Lisa rested her head against Mike's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she smiled, knowing that no matter how many years passed, no matter how much time changed the world around them, one thing would always remain the same: her love for him, his love for her, their unbreakable bond, their legendary romance. And as Mike tightened his arms around her, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head, he whispered, "Forever, my love." And she smiled, whispering back, "Forever and always," knowing, without a doubt, that their love story would never end. That evening, as the golden hues of the sunset painted the sky, Lisa stood in their beautifully lit bedroom, her hands trembling with excitement, her heart pounding so fast it felt like it might burst out of her chest, because tonight she was about to give Mike the most precious, the most life-changing news, the news that would turn their love story into something even more extraordinary, something that would tie them together not just as husband and wife, but as parents, as creators of a new life. And as she clutched the small pregnancy test in her hand, staring at the undeniable positive result, a wave of overwhelming emotions washed over her, tears brimming in her eyes as she placed a hand on her still flat stomach, already feeling an unbreakable connection to the tiny life growing inside her, already knowing that this was the beginning of something magical. And when she heard the familiar sound of Mike's footsteps approaching, her breath hitched, her fingers tightened around the test, and she took a deep breath, preparing herself for the moment she had been dreaming of since the second she had seen the result. And then the door opened, and there he was, her husband, her love, the man whose child she now carried, standing in the doorway, loosening his tie, his deep blue eyes instantly softening the moment they landed on her. And just like always, just like every single time he looked at her, his gaze was filled with nothing but adoration, with nothing but the kind of love that stole her breath away. And as he stepped toward her, concern flickered in his eyes, because she was just standing there, staring at him with trembling lips and unshed tears. And he instantly cupped her face, his touch warm, protective, his voice laced with worry as he murmured, "Lisa, baby, what's wrong?" And that was it. That was all it took for the dam inside her to break, for the overwhelming joy inside her to spill over. And before she could even think, before she could even gather herself, she let out a choked sob, a sob that was filled with nothing but happiness. And then, with shaky hands, she lifted the test, pressing it against his chest, watching as confusion crossed his handsome face, watching as he slowly looked down as his breath caught, as realization dawned in his deep blue eyes. And for a moment, for a single heartbeat, he just stood there, completely still, completely silent, as if his entire world had just been flipped upside down. And then, in the next second, a sharp gasp tore from his lips, and suddenly he was pulling her into his arms, crushing her against his chest, his entire body trembling as he buried his face into the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent, his breaths coming out in short, uneven pants, as if he couldn't believe what was happening, as if he was afraid this was just a dream, And then he pulled back, cupping her face with both hands, his thumbs brushing away the happy tears that streaked her cheeks, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. And when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion, raw and full of disbelief. "Lisa, are we—" But he couldn't even finish his sentence, couldn't even put into words the sheer magnitude of what he was feeling. And Lisa, her heart overflowing with love, simply nodded, whispering, "Yes, Mike, we're having a baby." And the second those words left her lips, a broken, breathless sound escaped him, a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and then he was lifting her off the ground, spinning her in circles, pressing frantic, desperate kisses all over her face, murmuring, oh my God, Lisa, I love you so much." And she giggled, clutching onto him, feeling the way his body shook with joy, the way his heart pounded wildly against her own, the way his entire being radiated with nothing but overwhelming love. And when he finally set her down, his hands moved to her stomach, his fingers trembling as he pressed them gently against the place where their baby, their tiny, precious miracle, was growing. And the moment his palm made contact, he sucked in a sharp breath, his eyes darkening with something indescribable, something fierce, something protective. And then he looked up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've made me the happiest man alive." And Lisa, her soul overflowing with nothing but love for this man, for the father of her child, cupped his face, brushing her lips against his in the softest, most heartfelt kiss, a kiss that held every unspoken word, every emotion, every promise. And as he deepened the kiss, as he poured every ounce of his love into her, she knew, without a doubt, that their baby was the luckiest child in the world, because they would be born into a love so pure, so powerful, so legendary. And as Mike slowly pulled away, resting his forehead against hers, his hands still on her stomach, his voice thick with emotion as he murmured, "From this moment on, you and our baby are my entire world," Lisa smiled, knowing that their love story, their beautiful, passionate, once-in-a-lifetime love, had just entered a brand new chapter, a chapter that would be filled with even more love, even more passion, even more unforgettable moments, because this wasn't just about them anymore. This was about the life they had created, the life they would cherish, protect, and love with every fiber of their being. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts beating as one, they both knew that this was only the beginning of the most beautiful journey of their lives. Months had passed since the day Lisa had told Mike the life-changing news of her pregnancy. And now, after endless nights of dreaming, hoping, and preparing, the moment they had both been waiting for had finally arrived, and it was more beautiful, more overwhelming, more life-altering than either of them could have ever imagined. Because now, as Lisa lay in the hospital bed, her body exhausted but her heart overflowing with happiness, Mike sat beside her, his hand wrapped protectively around hers, his other hand trembling slightly as he gazed down at the two tiny, perfect bundles in his arms, their newborn daughters, capturing her lips in the softest, most reverent kiss, a kiss that held all the love he felt for her, all the gratitude, all the devotion. And when he pulled back, his forehead resting against hers, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, "Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me them." And Lisa's eyes softened, her hand coming up to cradle his cheek as she smiled through her tears. "You gave me this too. We did this together." And as Mike sat there, his daughters in his arms, his wife by his side, his heart swelling with a kind of happiness, a kind of completeness he had never known was possible, he knew that his life, his heart, his entire existence had changed forever, because this wasn't just love anymore. This was family. This was legacy. This was the most beautiful, the most precious gift he had ever been given. And as he sat there, cradling his daughters, feeling the warmth of Lisa's hand on his cheek, He knew that he would spend every day of his life protecting them, cherishing them, loving them, and as the babies stirred again, one of them letting out the softest sound, Mike's lips curled into a smile, and he whispered, "Shh, Daddy's here. I've got you." And in that moment, in that quiet, perfect moment, surrounded by the three people who now meant more to him than life itself, Mike knew that his story, their story, had only just begun, because now it wasn't just about him and Lisa. It was about them, their daughters, their beautiful family. And as he leaned down once more, pressing another soft kiss to each of their tiny foreheads, his heart bursting with love, with gratitude, with sheer happiness, he whispered, "You'll always be safe. Always." And Lisa, watching the way he held their daughters, watching the pure devotion on his face, felt her heart overflow with so much love for this man, for this family, that she couldn't hold back the soft sob that escaped her lips. And when Mike turned to look at her, when he smiled and reached out, taking her hand, threading his fingers through hers, she knew with absolute certainty that this was their happily ever after, that their love, their bond, their family would only grow stronger from this day forward, because this was not just the birth of their daughters. This was the birth of a new chapter, a new journey, one that they would face together, hand in hand, heart to heart, forever. Years passed, but time seemed to have no power over the intensity of Mike and Lisa's love. If anything, it only grew deeper, stronger, more profound with each passing day, each shared moment, each quiet night where they lay in each other's arms, whispering words of love and devotion that never lost their meaning. Even after welcoming their beautiful twin daughters into the world, Mike and Lisa remained the perfect example of love, unchanged by the demands of parenthood, untouched by the exhaustion that often comes with raising children, because no matter how tired they were, no matter how chaotic their days became, their love never wavered, never dulled, never faded. Mike still looked at Lisa like she was the most precious thing in the world, his eyes dark with desire and reverence whenever she walked into a room, and Lisa still clung to him with that same breathless desperation, as though she would fall apart without the warmth of his arms around her. Their daughters, Ava and Emma, grew up in a house filled with love, laughter, and a deep, passionate connection between their parents that made them believe in the magic of true love. Every morning, Lisa would wake up to the gentle press of Mike's lips on her forehead, to the soft murmur of his voice as he whispered, "Good morning, beautiful." And despite the years that had passed, despite the sleepless nights and the demands of parenting, Lisa still felt her heart skip a beat every time she opened her eyes and found him looking at her like that, like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And even after long, exhausting days of business meetings and childcare, Mike would still come home with that same look of hunger and love in his eyes, dropping his briefcase at the door and walking straight toward Lisa like he had been starving for her all day. Lisa would smile, feeling that familiar warmth bloom in her chest as he wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a soft kiss to the side of her neck and whispering, "Missed you." And no matter how tired she was, no matter how hectic her day had been, she would melt into him, turning in his arms and letting him steal her breath with a kiss that made her knees weak. Their daughters would often giggle when they caught their parents kissing in the kitchen, covering their eyes and squealing, "Mommy and Daddy are in love again." But Lisa and Mike never stopped, never held back, because their love wasn't something to be hidden or dimmed. It was the heart of their family, the very foundation upon which their happiness was built. Mike would pull Lisa closer, his lips curving into that charming, possessive smile as he murmured, "Always in love with your mom." And Lisa's cheeks would flush, her heart racing even after all these years, because Mike still had that effect on her. He still made her feel like the most loved, the most desired woman in the world. And even at night, after the girls had fallen asleep, Lisa and Mike would retreat to their bedroom, where the world faded away, and it was just the two of them, wrapped in soft sheets and tangled limbs, whispering words of love and devotion between deep, lingering kisses. "You're still my world," Lisa would whisper against his lips, her hands sliding through his hair as Mike hovered over her, his dark eyes filled with love and need. "Always," he would promise, his voice thick with emotion as he pressed his forehead to hers. "You'll always be my everything." And when they lay there afterward, breathless and spent, Lisa would rest her head on Mike's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and Mike would stroke her hair, his fingers moving slowly, reverently, as though memorizing the feel of her against him. "I love you," he would whisper every night, and Lisa would always respond with the same 3 words, because no matter how many years passed, no matter how many challenges they faced, their love never weakened. It only grew stronger. Even when life threw obstacles their way, even when the stress of work and parenting weighed on their shoulders, they never lost sight of each other, never allowed the outside world to drive a wedge between them. Mike still brought Lisa flowers for no reason at all, still left love notes on her nightstand, still called her in the middle of the day just to say, "I miss you." Lisa, in return, made sure Mike always came home to warmth and comfort, easing his stress with soft touches and lingering kisses. And when he was overwhelmed, when the weight of his responsibilities became too much, Lisa would simply take his face in her hands, look into his eyes, and whisper, "I'm here, always." And those words were enough to calm him, to ground him, to remind him that no matter how hard things got, he would always have her. Their daughters grew up surrounded by that love, witnessing the way their father would wrap their mother in his arms and steal kisses from her when he thought no one was watching, witnessing the way their mother would gaze at their father with so much trust and admiration that it made their young hearts believe in forever. "Will I ever find love like that?" Ava would whisper to Emma sometimes, and Emma would smile and say, "We have the best example right in front of us." And that was true. Mike and Lisa were not just lovers. They were soulmates, partners, best friends, bound together by a love so deep, so unbreakable, that nothing, not time, not challenges, not even the exhaustion of parenthood, could ever diminish it. Their home was filled with love, with warmth, with laughter, and at the center of it all was Mike and Lisa, 2 hearts that had found each other and never let go. And when their daughters would fall asleep at night, tucked safely into their beds, Lisa and Mike would sit together by the fireplace, their hands intertwined, their hearts still beating in sync after all these years. "Do you think this feeling will ever fade?" Lisa would ask sometimes, and Mike would smile, pressing a kiss to the top of her head as he whispered, "Never. I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today, and even more the day after that." And Lisa would smile because she knew without a doubt that it was true, that their love wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, growing deeper with each passing moment, becoming the kind of love that inspired everyone around them, the kind of love that would last not just for a lifetime, but for eternity. Years passed, decades slipped by like sand through their fingers, but time held no power over the love that Mike and Lisa shared. It only deepened, growing richer, more profound with each wrinkle that formed on their faces, with each strand of silver that threaded through their hair. With each quiet morning they woke up beside each other, their hands intertwined beneath the sheets as sunlight filtered through the curtains. From the moment they first met in that coffee shop, Mike and Lisa had known their love was something rare, something unbreakable, and now, after all these years, that truth had only become more apparent. Mike still looked at Lisa with the same intensity that had burned in his eyes when they were young, and Lisa still melted under his gaze, still felt her breath hitch every time he touched her, kissed her, held her like he was afraid to lose her. Their love had weathered the tests of time, through the early sleepless nights of raising their twin daughters, through the stress of Mike's expanding business empire, through the inevitable trials that life had thrown their way. But not once had their love faltered. Not once had their bond weakened. In fact, it had only grown stronger, more resilient, more beautiful with every challenge they faced together. Even as they aged, even as their once youthful faces softened with the marks of time, the passion between them never faded. Mike still woke up every morning with Lisa curled into his side, her soft breathing warming his chest, and his first instinct was always to press a kiss to her forehead, to pull her closer and whisper, "Good morning, beautiful," just like he had done every day since they first married. Lisa would smile sleepily, her fingers tracing lazy patterns over his chest, as she murmured, "Good morning, my love." And just like that, they would start another day, wrapped in the comfort of their love. Their daughters, Ava and Emma, had grown into beautiful, successful women, but they still admired the way their parents looked at each other, still felt inspired by the devotion that had never wavered between them. "I hope I find love like yours," Ava would whisper sometimes, and Emma would nod, knowing their parents' love was not just rare, it was legendary. Even after decades together, Mike would still find ways to make Lisa feel special. He would bring her flowers just because, would take her out to dinner at her favorite restaurant, would surprise her with weekend getaways to the beach or the mountains, just so they could have time alone together. And Lisa, in return, made sure Mike always felt cherished, always felt supported. She would run her fingers through his hair when he came home, stressed from work, would massage his shoulders and kiss his temple, whispering, "I'm here, always." And those words would be enough to make Mike release a shaky breath, his hands tightening around her waist as he pulled her closer. And even after all these years, their kisses still had the power to steal Lisa's breath away, still made Mike's heart pound like it did when they were young. Mike would catch Lisa's hand sometimes when they were walking through the park, pull her close and kiss her deeply right there in front of everyone, making Lisa laugh and blush as she whispered, "Mike, people are watching." But Mike would just smile and say, "Let them watch. I'm still crazy about you." And he was utterly, hopelessly, irrevocably in love with her. When they traveled together, people would often mistake them for newlyweds because of the way Mike would hold Lisa's hand, the way his eyes would follow her every movement with possessive devotion, the way Lisa would lean into his touch and smile up at him with so much warmth and trust. Their love had not faded with time. It had become deeper, more profound, more meaningful. And when their grandchildren were born, Mike and Lisa's love only grew stronger. Watching Mike cradle their granddaughter in his arms, the same tenderness in his eyes that he had shown Lisa since the beginning, made Lisa fall in love with him all over again. "You're amazing," she would whisper as Mike rocked the baby to sleep, and Mike would smile, his free hand finding Lisa's as he replied, "I had the perfect woman to teach me how to love." Even in their quiet moments, their love remained palpable. Sitting together on the porch in the evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lisa would rest her head on Mike's shoulder, and Mike would kiss her hair, his arm wrapped securely around her. "Do you think we'll feel like this forever?" Lisa would ask softly, her voice touched with wonder. And Mike, without hesitation, would respond, "Forever and beyond, sweetheart." And Lisa believed him, because after all these years, after all the joy and the heartbreak and the triumphs they had faced together, Mike had never once broken a promise to her. When Lisa grew older and her body weakened, Mike became even more attentive. He would carry her up the stairs when her knees ached, would help her get dressed when her hands trembled, and would sit beside her for hours, reading to her or just holding her hand in silence. "I'm supposed to be taking care of you," Lisa would protest weakly sometimes, and Mike would just smile, his eyes dark with love as he said, You've taken care of me my whole life. Now it's my turn. And even then, even when they grew frail and the years settled heavily on their bones, their love remained fierce and undying. Mike would still steal kisses from Lisa when no one was looking, would still whisper, "You're so beautiful," even when Lisa's hair had turned silver and her skin had softened with age. And Lisa, no matter how tired she felt, would always smile and cling to him, would always whisper, "You're my world," because Mike had always been her world, her anchor, her safe place, her greatest love. When Mike's hair turned white and he walked a little slower, Lisa would hold his hand a little tighter, matching his pace because she never wanted to leave his side. And when Lisa's health began to fail, when the doctor said her heart was growing weak, Mike refused to leave her bedside. He would sit with her for hours, stroking her hand and pressing soft kisses to her fingers, whispering, "You're not leaving me yet. We still have forever." And Lisa would smile, her tired eyes filled with love as she whispered, "Forever," even when the world started to fade, even when Lisa's breaths grew shallow and her eyes fluttered closed. Mike was there, holding her hand, kissing her forehead, whispering, "I love you, I love you, I love you," over and over again. And when Lisa took her last breath, surrounded by her family, with Mike's hand still wrapped around hers, her face was peaceful, because she knew she had been loved with the kind of love that defied time and reason. And even after Lisa was gone, Mike would sit on the porch every evening, looking out at the sunset, feeling the warmth of Lisa's love in his heart. "Forever," he would whisper to the sky, and somehow he knew Lisa was still with him, still loving him from wherever she was. And when it was finally Mike's time to leave this world, his last breath was taken with Lisa's name on his lips. And the first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was her beautiful smile, waiting for him on the other side. Their love had conquered time, had transcended life and death. It was the kind of love that never ended, the kind of love that would live on forever in the hearts of everyone who had ever witnessed it. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting golden hues over the wide expanse of the backyard as Mike and Lisa sat together on the porch swing, their hands intertwined like they had been for decades, their hearts still beating in perfect sync despite the passing of time. The sound of their grandchildren's laughter echoed through the crisp evening air, a beautiful melody that reminded them of how far they had come, how their love had flourished and multiplied through the lives of the family they had built together. Mike's gaze drifted toward Lisa, his heart swelling with the same overwhelming love that had consumed him from the moment he first laid eyes on her so many years ago. Time had touched them both, leaving soft lines around Lisa's eyes and silver in her once dark hair. But to Mike, she had never looked more beautiful. The light from the sunset cast a glow over her delicate features, and as her soft brown eyes met his, he felt his breath hitch the same way it had when they were young and newly in love. Slowly, Mike reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind Lisa's ear before cupping her cheek in his hand. His thumb stroked her soft skin as he whispered, "You're still my world." Lisa's eyes glistened with quiet tears as a smile curved her lips. Without hesitation, she leaned closer, her hand resting on his chest as she whispered, "And you're still the breath I need to live." Their lips met in a soft, tender kiss, familiar yet electric, filled with the weight of a lifetime spent loving each other. Even now, after all these years, after raising their daughters, welcoming grandchildren into the world, and weathering every storm life had thrown their way, the passion between them remained fierce and unyielding. Mike's hand slid behind Lisa's neck, deepening the kiss, and Lisa sighed against his mouth, her fingers curling into his shirt as warmth bloomed through her chest. When they finally parted, Mike's forehead rested against hers, and their breaths mingled in the cool evening air. "I don't know how I got so lucky," Mike murmured, his voice low and reverent. Lisa smiled softly, her eyes shining with quiet adoration as she whispered, "It wasn't luck. It was fate." Mike's heart clenched at her words, and as he gazed at her, he realized that even after all these years, the depth of his love for her still overwhelmed him. He remembered the early days of their relationship, the shy smiles, the stolen kisses, the desperate need to be close to her. He remembered the day he proposed under a sky full of stars, the way Lisa had thrown herself into his arms and whispered yes against his lips. He remembered the way she had looked on their wedding day, walking down the aisle with tears in her eyes and a smile on her lips that had made him feel like the luckiest man alive. He remembered their honeymoon, the fiery passion that had ignited between them, the way Lisa had made him feel whole with every touch, every breathless whisper of his name. And he remembered the moment Lisa had told him she was pregnant, the sheer joy and disbelief that had filled him as he held her in his arms, the tears that had fallen freely down his face when he realized they were going to be parents. He remembered the day their twin daughters were born, the way his heart had nearly burst as he held those tiny, fragile lives in his arms, knowing that they were the perfect reflection of the love he and Lisa shared. He remembered the sleepless nights, the chaotic mornings, the sound of his daughter's laughter as they ran through the house. And through it all, Lisa had been his constant, his anchor, his strength, his everything. Mike's hand tightened around Lisa's as he whispered, "I don't ever want this to end." Lisa smiled, leaning into his side as her head rested on his shoulder. "It never will," she said softly. "As long as we're together, it will last forever." Mike kissed the top of her head, breathing in the soft floral scent of her hair. He couldn't imagine a life without her, wouldn't even try. She was his home, his heart, his purpose. Even as their grandchildren's laughter filled the air, even as the years continued to pass, Mike knew that his love for Lisa would never wane. It would only deepen, becoming richer and more profound with every shared sunrise and sunset. Their grandchildren raced toward them, Ava and Emma's children giggling as they climbed into their grandparents' laps. "Grandpa, Grandma," they squealed, wrapping their small arms around them. Mike chuckled, lifting one of his granddaughters into his arms as Lisa kissed the other's cheek. "You two are getting so big," Lisa said, her voice full of warmth. Mike smiled, his eyes soft as he watched Lisa interact with their grandchildren. She had always been so gentle, so nurturing, whether with their daughters or now with their grandkids, and it only made him fall harder for her. His gaze lingered on her profile, memorizing every detail. The curve of her lips, the crinkle at the corners of her eyes, the way her silver hair framed her face. "What?" Lisa asked, catching his stare. Mike smiled. "Just admiring my beautiful wife." Lisa blushed, swatting his arm playfully. "After all these years, you're still flirting with me." Mike leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear as he murmured, "Always." Lisa's heart fluttered like it had when they were young, and she leaned into him, her hand sliding over his chest as she whispered, "I love you." "I love you more," Mike replied, his hand sliding around her waist. Their grandkids eventually ran off to play again, leaving Mike and Lisa alone on the porch. The sun dipped lower, casting the sky in shades of pink and orange as Mike pulled Lisa closer. Her head rested against his chest, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her tightly. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Lisa asked softly. Mike smiled. "Every day." "Do you think we'll still feel like this forever?" Lisa whispered. Mike's gaze darkened with quiet certainty. "Forever and always," he vowed. Lisa smiled, her eyes filling with tears as she whispered, "Forever and always." And in that moment, Mike knew with absolute certainty, that their love would outlast everything. Time would pass, their bodies would grow old, but the love between them would never fade. It was the kind of love that transcended time and space, the kind of love that would echo through eternity. Even after they were gone, their love story would live on in the hearts of their children and grandchildren. They would be remembered as the couple who had it all, not just passion, not just devotion, but a love so deep and true that it had defied the odds and lasted a lifetime. And as they sat there together on that porch swing, watching the sun set over their family, Mike pressed a soft kiss to Lisa's forehead and whispered once more, "You're still my world." Lisa smiled, her eyes shining as she whispered back, "And you're still the breath I need to live." And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, Mike and Lisa sat together in peaceful silence, their hearts beating as one, knowing that their love would last forever and always.